Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Southeast Media Sunrise, dedicated to giving a voice to authors of all genres. I'm your host, Jodi Hockinson. Joining us remotely by phone today is Kelly Mack McCoy, author of Rough Way to the Highway, a Christian mystery suspense novel. Kelly Mack McCoy is a pun intended, retired truck driver turned author. He spent most of his career behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, traveling extensively through 48 states, gathering a lifetime of material for his books. Rough Way to the Highway is his first novel and the first in a series of novels about the adventures of trucker-turned-pastor-turned-trucker Mack McClain. Kelly Mack McCoy lives in Spring Branch, Texas, with his lovely wife, Miss Emily, and their two Yorkies, Dixie and Dolly. Welcome, Kelly, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Jodi. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Most everyone thinks they can write a novel. What made you decide to write one?
Well, Jodi, most people think that they can write a novel until they actually sit down and do it. Most novels end up in some drawer somewhere collecting dust. It's amazing the number of people that I've run into that have that very same thing happen to them. But it's something that I've had in my heart since I was a kid. I used to love to go to big, Barnes and Noble type bookstores and just walk up and down the aisles and just pick out books at random and read them a little bit. And I would often pick up novels and I would be amazed at the prose, and I would think there's no way I could ever be a writer. And then I would walk down another aisle, pick up another book at random, and I would read it, and I would think, this is just really bad writing. But some way or another, he managed to have that book, get onto the aisle or onto the shelf, and if he can do it, then I can do it too. But life just has gotten in the way, as life has a way of doing, and so people that grew up in my neighborhood didn't become writers. I've got a pretty rough background, and so I hit the road with a truck at 21 to see the country and have a little adventure. And so the rest is history. I finally got around to it, and there it is.
How did you know that you wanted to be a writer? How did you get started?
Well, it's again, it's just something that I knew. I just knew in my heart, that's what I would like to do. I would be a writer someday. And, again, the rough background part, guys from my neighborhood, they didn't grow up to be writers. They didn't grow up to be, go to college and all that sort of thing. And so, again, just life got in the way as I went along there. And once I started driving a truck, and driving a truck for me was just a poor boy's way of seeing the world. And so that tends to be a very consuming occupation. So, it's something I never did. I dabbled in it a little bit, and, I did write a little here and there for smaller publications. But I finally, when the trucking company I worked for years ago went bankrupt, I decided to take my writing seriously. And so I joined a little writers group, an awesome group there in San Antonio. And so I was kind of gained an awful lot from those writers, and probably what I gained as a writer I gained through osmosis from hanging around a bunch of other great writers.
What inspired you to write this book?
Well, this particular book, again, is since I drove a truck for so long, it's best to write what you know about. And so it's something I had in my mind for quite some time, but I teamed up with another writer of my group, John Floyd Mills, who liked my writing style, and he approached me with the idea of us partnering together and writing a series of novels about a trucker out there on the road and his adventures. And John was a writer from the old San Antonio Light newspaper, and he actually created his own publishing company to help writers like himself break in, because he knew, all the ins and outs of it. So we began, we met a number of times, and we started writing this first novel, and it turns out that John and I had just radically different writing styles, and it just wasn't going to work. So he went off and he created a couple of novels of his own. And then I kind of took this one and ran with it. We never got past the concept stage really. And so I started that, and then it's just languished in that dusty drawer I talked of earlier until John died here a couple of years back. And that was the final motivation for me to, pick up my pen and paper again and see the novel through to completion.
Who encouraged you along the way?
Well, I'm very blessed that way. I've had a lot of people who've been very encouraging. I belong to two writers groups, and so they helped me a lot through the early stages. When I first joined the group, it's something I just had in my heart. Did a little bit of writing here and there, but I really didn't have anything to offer when I showed up there. But I did discover that once I did share my writing, that some people liked it, and some people liked it a lot. And so I was able to grow and develop my own writing style. And so I developed a lot of connections who are in the business, and they have a lot of there's many published authors in the group, and they have many connections. And so I was, they're amongst those professionals. Again, the osmosis thing, I think I just kind of soaked in everything I could from them, and that's what I learned.
So do you consider yourself a plotter or a pantser? Do you outline and plan your story, or do you just sit down and write?
I'm a total 100% pantser. I couldn't outline a book before I wrote it, especially a novel, if you held a gun to my head. I envy people who can do that, but I don't understand how somebody can actually plot out a novel before you write it. Now, I had the beginning of the story in mind. I knew how it was going to end. I had the general idea of how the plot was going to go, and I had an ending. I think you have to have somewhere to go. If Mack, the protagonist in the novel, just starts wandering around, it's not going to be, he's just wandering around, get lost. It's not going to be a very interesting book. So I knew exactly where it was going to go. I knew the events or some of the events that were going to happen along the way. But other than that, I just sat down and started writing, and here we are.
How long did it take you to write your book?
Well, that's a good question, Jodi, and I get that often. I'm never able to give a precise answer because it just depends on how you define right. Again, I started this book some time back, and like most writers, I would say, who don't, go on to become authors, that book ends up in a drawer somewhere and just collects dust. And that was the fate of my book for quite some time. And, if John hadn't died, it may still be sitting in that drawer. I don't know. But, once he died and I had a, basic start on that and a couple of years back, then I would say in that time, and that 2 years is the time it took to take it from beginning to end.
How many rewrites did you do on it?
Oh, gosh. I am a procrastinator, so I just write and rewrite, and I'm never satisfied with it, and that's very typical of writers. But I just finally had to get to the point and say, okay, I'm done. And then, I turned it over to the professionals, and, I had it professionally edited, and there was a lot of back and forth with that. But it's very common, I've discovered, with writers to never be happy with the writing. And once you let it go and it's out there at the publishers, and then it's in print, and then you look at it and you're still not going to like it. Probably you're still not going to be totally satisfied. But at some point you have to just quit and say, I'm done. Send it off to the editor.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
I'll bet.
How long do you self-edit your own manuscript before you send it into an editor?
Well, it's, the same thing. I edit and edit and edit. Again, I've had the very good fortune of belonging to two very good writers groups. And so I would self-edit, and then I don't like to bring, raw material or even, what we think of as a first draft into the writers group. So I like to be pretty far along with it, and I've self-edited much of it, and then I like to bring it into the writers groups, and then have them do their critique, and then I'm able to edit it more. And I call that whole process working the stupid out of my book, because you think that you're done with it, but you read it and you read what you think is there, and then often you bring it into for critique and editing, and you discover, well, maybe it's not as good as I thought it was, or not as well developed as I thought it was. So again, it went through that process, and and then. So eventually, again, you just have to stop and just turn it over to the editor and live with the result.
Looking back, what advice would you give yourself at the beginning of your journey?
Oh gosh, I would advise myself to just sit down and write, and that is the most difficult thing for writers to do. We're very, very creative in avoiding that one aspect of it. You have to just sit down and write, and don't, just turn off that self-critic and just do it. And the second thing is, there's a whole new world out there as far as publishing goes. Back in the old days, a writer would write, and then he would send it off to an agent, and the agent would present it to publishers, and it was a very long process, and it was a book by committee, basically. And so there are a lot of other options out there. There's just many, many options. Again, this publishing company that John had, the lady that heads up one of the writers group that goes to, she actually owns that publishing company now. She asked me some of the process that I went through in getting my book done and out there, only because there are just so many options out there now, and nobody can keep up with it. So again, to shorten the answer, just get out there and just do it, and that's the only way anybody's successful.
There are a lot of experts behind a novel, editors, developmental editors, beta readers, and such. How did you find your perfect crew?
Well, again, I was blessed with having so many of those people around me at the two writers groups that I belong to. There are several professional editors in both those groups. The first one actually had four guys with PhDs there. So I don't, and here's a dummy like me walks in with that group, and so many of them are so much more knowledgeable than I am about the whole process. But so I had those available, and then I was blessed with an excellent cover designer, and it was actually one of the pastors at my church offered to design my cover, and I didn't even know at the time that he did such a thing, but he just offered, and then you look at that cover, he did just an awesome job. That's an awesome cover.
Yeah, I love your cover. And by the way, that was I love the inscription you put on the copy that you sent me. That was wonderful. Thanks for going to the extra trouble.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Jodi. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you get time to write it. To read it. I've got a whole stack of books beside my bed now, so I know how hard it is to find time.
Yeah, it totally is. What do you know about writing and publishing now that you wished you had known sooner?
Well, again, there are just so many other options out there. I did pursue the traditional route for, I'll bet, Jodi, probably about 2 weeks. You send off your manuscript to agents, and there's all kinds of resources where you can, research your agents and find the ones who are most likely to be interested in your work. And so you send those off, and then it's typical to get a number of rejection letters back. And stay at it long enough, you may find somebody who's interested, and then it's the publishing by committee process. But you don't have to do that anymore. There are a lot of options out there, and especially for somebody like me, the former truck driver, and I'm talking to all these agents and publishers. Hey, I've got this novel. You want to take a look at it? No, I don't think I'll pass. So, you have to be a little bit more creative than that. And I took what I call a hybrid route. It's self-published or it is traditionally published, however you want to look at it. It's published through HarperCollins. It's one of their self-publishing divisions, but at the same time, you go through all of the same process that anybody would go through. And I just kind of shortened the process, but it's considered a traditionally published novel, and it really is. It's just I didn't go through an agent.
What is the best advice you could give other writers about writing or publishing?
Well, what I would advise them, the same thing I had to do myself here, and that is just to sit down and write. That is the most difficult thing. I've learned that I'm not the only one with this problem. It's very typical with writers. We're very, very creative in avoiding writing. We'll do anything we can do once we sit down and we have this time blocked out to write. It used to be in the past as a long-running joke. You would sharpen pencils and you would do whatever you can do. And now you fool around the internet, and a lot of us just have to shut off the internet. Otherwise, we'll get distracted. And then we'll start doing the research, and then there's an endless amount of research. So to shorten the answer, you just have to sit down and write. And then when it comes to the publishing process, you have to just jump out there and do it. There's so many options out there these days.
Let's go back to your book, Rough Way to the Highway. What do you expect readers to take away from your book?
Well, it's funny, Jodi. I've gotten so many responses from so many readers who have given me some awesome feedback, and they have a number of takeaways. It kind of depends on the readers, and I, the reader. If there's one overarching theme, though, it is that God is at work in our lives in ways that we can't even imagine. And so no matter how bad things get, no matter how disastrous the circumstances appear, God is always at work in ways that we can't imagine.
That's a fantastic message. Looks like we're out of time. Anyone interested in purchasing this book can drop by your local bookstore. You can also log into semediapro.com, log into roughwaytothehighway.com, or Amazon. It's available in Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. That was Kelly Mack McCoy, author of Rough Way to the Highway, a Christian mystery suspense novel. Thanks again for joining us today, Kelly.
Thank you, Jodi. I appreciate it. You're an awesome host.
You're an awesome guest. And listeners, if you're interested in getting your book published, please visit us at semediapro.com and click on the book publishing link. This is Jodi Hockinson, host of Southeast Media Sunrise, Southeast Media Productions. Like us on Facebook at Southeast Media Productions, or visit our website at semediapro.com.